My name is Jarie Bolander. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Ethos podcast. On this podcast, we're going to take a deep dive into the traits, values, beliefs, and skills of all sorts of entrepreneurs to learn how to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient world. Let's get started. Ittai Dayan, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. And hi, Jarie.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. You are the co-founder and CEO of Rhino Health, which is doing some fascinating things related to federated computing and using AI to unlock data silos. I mean, I read this, I looked at this, I'm like, I have no idea what this is, but I want to know what this is. Because as everyone knows, I was in the digital health space, and I'm very fascinated by how we can use technology to help the healthcare system. Most other people also know that the reason why I had a real vested interest in it was because my wife, my late wife now, had leukemia, and she died 6 years ago from it. And our experience with the whole health system made me just double down on trying to fix it. So what you're doing seems just super cool. But before we dig into what Rhino Health is doing and how you're going to change the world, which I hope you will, I think you can. Why don't you tell us how you got to do what you're doing today?
Sure. So once upon a time, I was a doctor. And then I went to work for Boston Consulting Group and learned about all the kind of the problem space of the healthcare system and kind of all the stuff that needs to be fixed. And I also learned about the value and potential value of artificial intelligence and data analytics in doing that. I went forward to Mass General Brigham, where I led a center for developing AI software as medical device solutions, and kind of trying to solve these healthcare gaps, and kind of from one hospital that would then license technology to industry in order to disseminate that technology further. And that was really exciting, great period of my life. It did also show me that at the end of the day, when you're working on data silos of one institution, even if it's a large institution, you're still limited in kind of, you don't know what you don't know about what's going on outside that. And that got me interested in the whole idea of federating data and federated learning. I did a large international study using the federated learning framework from NVIDIA, which was called Clara FL at the time, like a rudimentary platform for federated learning. Federated learning is, in essence, train an AI algorithm on multiple data silos while only sharing kind of components of the algorithm, not the underlying data, and somehow making it into one better global algorithm. So I proven that technique can help you unlock data silos faster with kind of less risk and less less issues around trust and sharing data. And I asked, folks from NVIDIA, are you going to take this platform, kind of turn it into a commercial hardened platform? They said, well, probably not, but maybe you should. And so I decided to do that. I left my last job and started Rhino Health, joined my co-founder, Yuval Baror, who was a Googler and kind of a very deep tech guy. I wasn't a deep tech guy at the time. And we raised money at the best time ever to raise money. It was the end of 2020. Then started the company and kind of launched it in 2021, went out of left stealth and kind of really got going. We've raised another round since then and disseminated the platform to a few dozens of healthcare institutions worldwide, some early commercial customers like pharma customers, professional societies, tech partners, and some others. So today we have over 150 users, over 30 projects running on the platform, etc. And kind of like still early, but starting to reach PMFs. The platform itself does this federated learning process, but it also does what happens before that and what happens after that. So from data discovery and ingestion, data mapping and harmonization, modeling, deployment, analytics, and retraining. So kind of like the entire spectrum of data science and AI. It's a platform for developers and builders. So it's not like a no code, low code. It's like for coders and people who are building pipelines and building visualization and kind of like anything you need to do in order to leverage that. And the ultimate goal is to become a platform which applications that use AI and data analytics are built on, with us intermediating the federated data, meaning data that's not sitting in one place, and helping the application access that data in a seamless way. It's an idea that's, to be honest, I'm not sure if it's completely novel. Like the idea that like heavy data and private data are tough to share is not something new, and there's been also sort of like different approaches towards that. We came into the market in a time where technology was convergent, the customer need was more convergent than it was in the past, and the regulation was more permissive, or whatever, more encouraging, in the sense that we've had the GDPR, HIPAA, CCPA, people, and kind of like all that, and we're like, well, this is getting complicated. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with data if we transfer it to a third party, and kind of like, let's rethink how we do that. So it's been definitely a good timing in that. And I'd like to credit ourselves for it, but there's always some level of stochasticity in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, well, timing's always certainly good. I mean, if you raise money in 2020 and another round in 2021, you pretty much hit the perfect thing. And then, of course, the rest of the world kind of.
We also raised in 2022 and 2023. So,
well, look at you.
And then it got real with a step up. Man.
Awesome.
Yeah, so when it got real full.
Yeah. No, it's great, because I mean, this problem of data training, anonymizations, privacy, security, all that stuff, not just in healthcare. Healthcare is the worst part of it because there's a lot of very sensitive data. But, like at my day job, I work with a lot of companies that do like advertising data, like TransUnion is an example that does that sort of stuff through some of their platforms. And, they have clean rooms that they put the data in and you can reconcile and stuff. But that's all, I think, a couple steps behind what you guys are doing. It's like, yes, it's in their clean room and you can, minge and mash it or whatever. But it looks like what you're doing is taking it sort of to the next step. It's not trying to reconcile data to say that like your audience is my audience is an example, which is a bad one. But you're just trying to take it to the level where you don't have to worry about privacy. You don't have to worry about centralizing all this data in one spot, but you can use the data to train these tools, which is they need a ton of training. Obviously, that's part of the challenge with AI. But you can do it in a way that scales kind of nicely. Did I kind of get that right, or am I kind of off base?
Yeah, I think you're getting it. The point about reconciliation is an interesting one. Like you're talking, I think, ultimately about like matching data from one silo to another.
Yes.
That's an area that we don't do as much. We can work using tokens. So if you've already like used a matching product to say who is who, then you can draw conclusions on people based on data from more than one location without having to identify them. So that's definitely a tool we'd use. We're really on the compute level of that. So more on the tooling and algorithm training and the ML ops part of it, less on the kind of Less on the kind of like, I don't know, data marketplace of it.
Yeah, it's more the reconciliation to sell it or to optimize, like what TransUnion does, and a couple other ones as well. This is a common thing in the ad space. Like they reconcile the reach and frequency and then say, yeah, this demographic got your ad. Yay, so they can figure out the currency of how much it's worth. Whereas this seems to be, which obviously is like probably 2 or 3 steps beyond that. Hey, we're going to build a data ML AI pipeline analysis engine or analysis pipeline, and we're going to put these data sources in so that you can train and refine your model. But you don't have to worry about all the privacy things. You don't have to worry about downloading whatever whatever the movement of data that's going to be a pain for all the GDPR and all that stuff. We solve that. Go forth and build cool stuff. And in healthcare, this is especially important because of all the rich data that never gets looked at. I mean, there's mountains and gobs and I don't know how many petabytes of data there was just floating around that would be hugely beneficial to humanity if we could tap into. So you mentioned that you have about 150 users of the platform right now?
A bit more, but the main key is that we're installed in over 30 healthcare organizations, and we're being used for kind of a lot of different purposes by a lot of different customers, and proving out more and more use cases that can be built on that platform.
That's great. Because one of the things that I found out during Jane's leukemia illness is they were trying to do DNA sequencing to find out which variant of leukemia she had. It ends up they lost the sample or the sample got processed wrong. I don't remember what the whole thing was, but I remember we were trying to look at all the studies, like what's her, survival rate and whatever. Yeah. And they were all, small number studies, not a lot of meta studies, and hard to figure out okay, what's the real good treatment plan for this? And it seems like that's the perfect application for this.
First of all, I didn't say it before, so sorry to hear about your late wife. I wasn't aware, but I haven't met you before, so sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
This kind of use case does come up from some of our customers, and especially on the academic research side, since today it's there's been kind of the researcher picks and shovel space is not evolved. Mm-hmm. You can either kind of there's a lot of digital health spot solutions that solve for a very small use case that's fairly kind of narrow. I think most of the kind of AI decision-making companies are kind of grappling with that, while a lot of the most high-value things you could do is, as you said, find additional patients and what is their prognosis, how did they respond to different chemo agents, different biologic agents, and kind of turbocharge scientific research and translate it much faster into actionable insights for clinicians. And we have, for example, we have several leading institutions in the US, including MD Anderson, Dana-Farber, UCSF, Mayo Clinic, and others working on early detection of pancreatic cancer. They all have their own data assets. None of them are of sufficient size to kind of really create a performant enough tool. Institutions like that are unlikely to move kind of a million cases around for scientific research, but that's what you ultimately need to do with faster scientific research. And so, and especially as in the field of AI, a lot of the low-hanging fruit has already been picked. So it's okay, the stuff that's really works in the workflow and really addresses a big problem. It's been developed and sold. And a lot of the more upstream stuff is kind of like, it's challenging to bring it to market. You need to first do external validation of the data. Sorry, for algorithm, you need to do market validation of algorithm. Do enough people care about solving this question? And so I see us as ultimately we don't just work with researchers in academia, we work with industry researchers and app developers, professional societies who are busy in regulating AI and kind of like a lot of myriad of users. The ultimate ideal customer would be somebody who wants to access data from multiple locations, heavy data and private data that you don't want to share easily. And we are able to reduce that burden from them, and that way accelerate the time to insight, time to market, time to value.
Yeah, because I think this is one of the major roadblocks for a lot of AI in general, and I think it's just fascinating because one of the things as entrepreneurs we always got to figure out is, okay, is the technology I'm developing, am I just developing a technology, trying to find a solution, or solve a problem, or is this really, really nasty problem that I can apply what I'm building to solve? And that is the biggest dilemma of most entrepreneurs. It's trying to figure out, as you mentioned, product market fit. Where's the sweet spot? How are we going to accelerate this? It gets even worse in the healthcare space because they're generally resistant to change. Don't want to do it the new way. They'd rather do it the old way.
And a part of it is also because I think a lot of tech startups try to bypass the paradigm, kind of like R&D paradigm of healthcare, and just say hey, I'm going to reimagine something. And there's a reason why healthcare is conservative. People prefer humans to make mistakes than bots making mistakes. There's liability questions, regulation questions, and ultimately the whole idea of translational research, getting people to actually use new tools in the right way, understand the value of them, the impact on outcomes, understanding unintended consequences. These are all kind of big fields. And I don't think the disruptor mindset is always that conformant with that. So that's a big part of what we try to do. We try to disrupt something, but not disrupt the R&D paradigm. We try to disrupt the data sharing paradigm. The fact that the only way you could get access to the insights you need is by sharing a lot of data through a middleman.
Right.
And I think in that regard, we found that jives really well. We've had customers before we had a product. And if at all, I'd kind of recommend something to a budding entrepreneur, kind of after 3 years of entrepreneurship.
You're an expert.
Start from finding a customer. It precedes product, it precedes business model, definitely precedes pricing model. Find a customer group that fits the intended use of your product, and kind of build everything else around that. You don't have a product yet, so you might not sell something, but rather do a co-development agreement.
Yeah.
Or you have an early product but it's unproven, based payments on performance.
Yeah.
Interesting. Find the kind of find the value story and find the kind of the win-win you need in order to get somebody to work with you. And especially in healthcare, because it's not a space where you'd kind of invest a year in stealth and then come out and people are immediately, oh, this is amazing. I totally want the healthcare world and life sciences world will ask you, who is using your product? How are we using it? Are we happy with it? Do they vouch for you? Are you credible? Is your product credible? And healthcare, indifferent from a lot of other industries, were kind of there's a lot of orderliness that doesn't really exist there. Like you've installed in one hospital, the next IT system will be nothing like it. And the
Yes.
next one also nothing like it. And the procurement processes will be nothing like it. And the user itself will maybe hopefully have some similarity, but if everything is different, it's really hard to scale a company. But it's a challenge. And the best thing you can do is kind of like get your stuff out there and let people work together with you. And if you're passionate about something that other people are also passionate about, and you can like establish that, that's really important.
No, I really love that insight on the disruptor mindset. Because a lot of Silicon Valley, I mean, this is the same with government. You see it all the time. The Silicon Valley folks are just like, oh, this government process is crazy. Why aren't you guys just using technology to make it better? And they don't understand the inherent ballast in the system and the bureaucracy and the institution. And they don't understand that the goal of government is not efficiency, it's fairness. And once you understand that, then you can navigate around what you have to do. And I love how the way you put it, because it is essential when you understand and you're in a market and you're trying to find customers that you can be disruptive, but you can't disrupt the way their mindset, at least initially. You have to go disrupt like how we work together so they can understand it. And I love that because, the same thing happened to me when I was at my digital health startup. We were tracking the samples of clinical samples, and we found people to work with, but the need just wasn't there. And it was just, it was too much disruption that they couldn't handle.
You have to bridge the gap between where I'm going to be today and kind of like where's the ideal world that I'm imagining. And that often works based on kind of like, some of it is the macroeconomics and the macro, and some of it is very micro. Like, who is going to pay me for a unit of my product tomorrow? And that's often kind of like that's what I didn't like about consulting, to be honest. A lot of it was like macro, and it works well for like a big company who can say, I'm going to like sink in a lot of effort in building this imaginary reality. And even then you often kind of like it falls through the cracks, like, during the process. But for a startup, you need to think about like, who are your early adopters? Who's going to start working with you tomorrow, leveraging your product, saying, oh, I can't do without this. And it sounds banal, but it's a very non-trivial insight you get after a while. I've heard so many ideas. I've had myself ideas like, wouldn't it be neat if everybody didn't have to share data and it made the data collaborations easier? Great. Now, who are going to be the first 100 users who care enough about this to use the new untested product, break their teeth on your early stuff, work on your early documentation, wait 2 days to get a response for to open a ticket and get a response. And these are your evangelists. You have to respect them and honor them and kind of like love them the most, because you have the highest degree of unity with them. And after you've built something of that value, scaling it up, it's still like a big effort in and out, but you kind of like, what you're offering the market. And I'm talking about that, especially in the tech world. Like I think that sometimes you like, like a CRO service, and I'm at a better CRO service, or something like that, you can do tech-enabled services that will like work better. But if you really want to like reimagine something, it's just really hard.
Yeah. And not intuitively obvious in some cases what thing you're really solving. I mean, I've found that a bunch of times with companies that I've started and then failed. It's like, what were we really solving? And to your point about the evangelists, the super consumers that are like, they're on board. They're part of the tribe. They're going to fly the pirate flag and can get on with you, because they see the future, and it's hard to find those people. But when you find them, it's magic almost, because
Yeah.
that shared vision is so important.
And it's better to follow your users than follow the users you want. I'd also say it was like when I started out, I'd get into calls and everybody thought that federation is exhilarating, is exciting, is cool. And everybody would talk with me about, are you doing swarm learning? Are you doing encryptions this, encryption that? Are you doing, and it occurred to me at some point that many people saw it as more like an intellectual question. And when you got to the actual hands-on users, ones would actually buy the product, the questions are really different.
Yeah.
And especially when you're developing like tech products, the people you want to partner with tech, but you don't want to listen to tech too much. Because it often takes you kind of like a certain path of like building like a very feature rich maybe, or something that's like, exciting to somebody. And I'm talking a bit about you from a bias of somebody who sells ultimately to AMCs, pharma, professional societies. Like that's kind of like my core offering. And so like largely providers and then industry researchers. They're not looking for what like Apple is looking for.
Yeah.
And often what they're looking for is there's so much tech today, like so much like big tech. We're often looking to like something to make that technology accessible to a real world user who might not be a very early adopter of cloud, might not have kind of like $1 billion IT budget. One of the KPIs we've been asked about is like, okay, how fast can you do an install? So part of the answer to that is technological, but part of that is just knowing how to go for procurement. Okay, so that suddenly becomes kind of like part of your value proposition, knowing how to go for procurement. It's not really, like a product or a tech or a market strategy play or something like
Right. Right. No, it's true. I mean, it's the solution. Like what problem am I solving? And it's amazing, but a lot of tech companies don't lead with that. They lead with the look at my whiz bang thingy and how cool it is. And yet, to your point, which I really love, there's the people that are going to get excited about it at the top level, and then there's the people that are going to actually use it and pay for it, or are going to have to convince the people at the top level to pay for it. And so it's almost like you've got different tiers of messaging, different tiers of user that you really have to have a cohesive story for. But then also, God, it must have been tough to like crack the nut of, okay, which one of these folks is the one that I've got to convince. I mean, it's just interesting that a lot of this stuff you see time and time again, and that's a reason why it's so powerful to talk about it.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So any kind of mistakes that you've made that you're like, gosh, I wish I would have known this before I started? Or is it pretty much, 3 years in, you're like, I'm riding the wave?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I would say, everything that you think will take time will take a few multiples of that time. Yeah, it's hard for an early stage company to run more than one use case and more than one like market strategy in an early stage. Even if you're building an ecosystem or you're building something that has multiple stakeholders, say, okay, this quarter I'm attacking this stakeholder, this quarter I'm targeting this stakeholder, and not kind of try to do everything at the same time. If something makes sense, it will click. If something doesn't make sense, it won't click. Hire purposely. And I'd say on the hire based on demand, right? I'd say like you need to now like get into an MVP. You think that MVP is this and that story points. Okay, so you hire this and that tech talent. On the business side, I'd say stuff really depends on your maturity. Like you hire a salesperson where you're like too early, that salesperson will get frustrated because he won't be able to sell. Definitely somebody who's never like sold an early stage product. And in many cases, what you're actually looking for is for somebody who's like, really does business development or partnering rather than kind of like doing the hard sell. Always optimize for usage. Don't optimize for price. Don't optimize for usage. If at the end of the day somebody says you help them, create value, and that's what you need in an early stage company. Not, I've heard of many startups that get to $1 million ARR really quickly, and then because they were good in kind of like finding a small market for it. So it's important, but it can't replace, really like usage and momentum in usage. My investors asked in the past when we had talked about like which KPIs should we optimize, and I said we should optimize a KPI,
a single one.
I meant like be really good at something.
I love it.
Every quarter I'd say like, is this ARR, is this revenue, is this booking? And ultimately, the market will lead you. You can't decide for the market which KPIs you're going to be good at. You need to have a business model, and if that business model clicks, it will show you growth. The growth may come in unexpected ways, and it may come in a non-linear way. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I don't know, my bias is always get the product in the hands of people. That is the one most important thing. And if you have any weaknesses in your plan, in your go-to-market, your business model, they will make themselves visible quickly once you use the product.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Nothing. You have 4 labs using it, but nobody renews. You'll know that you have a challenge pretty quickly. You can only get labs to use it once, not twice. The cost of maintaining your lab relationships, ramping up, you'll find it, you'll solve for it. If you're trying to do something that's completely deterministic and pre-thought of, then you shouldn't do entrepreneurship.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I like the whole single KPI. Be good at one thing, then go on to be good at the next thing. Too often, depending on the type of person you are, you get sort of sucked in all these KPIs and stuff. But interesting. Yeah, no, that's wow. It seems like a really interesting journey. Like, I mean, from an MD to this, I mean, how was the transition from, doctor seeing patients to Boston, you were Boston Consulting Group to now founder of a startup? I mean, was it hard? I mean,
I went from being like a clinician, so being kind of like a high class technician that also did research, into an advisor who told people what to do but never followed up. Then became an entrepreneur in a system. So I guess kind of an operator with limited liability, into an entrepreneur, so an operator with maximal liability. I can say I've done it in several phases. And I think it's been kind of like a good gradual step. Definitely, I'd say the one step that was the hardest for me was the first and the last. Like going from medicine into non-medicine, going from big company to starting a company was definitely the biggest changes.
Yeah, it always seems to be those big transition points. But I mean, any regrets on doing it? It sounds like, I mean, the vision of this becomes reality, a lot of people in the world are going to be better off for it, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, definitely no regrets. This has been an amazing journey, and it continues being an amazing journey. And there's no better way to learn how to be an entrepreneur than being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, not a lot of books that prepare you for that.
I read some stuff in hindsight, like after 2 years, I was like, yeah, that's a solid point. I'm not sure if I read it beforehand, I would have fully appreciated some of the advice.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
And for us, it's a very exciting time because it's like the whole renaissance of privacy enhancing technologies is happening now. And so there's all sorts of like, okay, 6 months ago, you were trying to do something and people were like, and then suddenly it's like, oh, I need this. Now I know what I need. Now I know why I need this. And on one hand, we've kind of like been kind of like, joining the market at the right time. And part of the time we've been educating the market.
Yeah.
And that's a very, I can't really say what the blend of it is, but it's a very exciting thing to witness firsthand when it happens.
Oh yeah. When they finally get it, right? Like, hey, that guy just talked to me what I just was telling the market for a year. Like they get it finally. They call me up and they're like, oh, you know what? We need your Bismo thing. You're like, what? 6 months ago, you didn't even know who we were.
It's tough because sometimes when nobody gets you, it means you're really barking up the wrong tree, and sometimes it means you're really innovative.
Yeah,
and you can't always know that. And like when I started with the first kind of like institutional investors, somebody was like, okay, so like this federated thing, I'm not sure if so aren't you guys like moving data around into like one big data place? And I was like, no, it's not like that. So how do you get the insights if you don't bring the data? And it was kind of like, and Randy said, what you need is something more catchy. Like you should say something like, you're the Uber of this, or you're like the X of Y, and said, maybe you guys are like the GitHub for data. And we were like, we are not the GitHub for data, and kind of like that. And then like, after a few investors like Yuval and I sitting, I was like, so what is your company doing? Like, we're the GitHub for data. I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting tired. I'm getting tired of this. And they were like, oh, got it.
Yeah. And you're like, that's it? That's the thing?
It's not even true. We're not like GitHub for data. We use GitHub, but it's not, that's like another replacement product. But
No. I love that. It's so funny because the advice is they tell you don't do that. But then some of these investors, like, if you're like you said, you're out there, you're like on the cutting edge and like you're trying to like, they just cannot connect the dots for the life of them. They're like, you got to dumb it down. And it's like, what is it?
It's really true in a way. Like people often like don't listen enough to investors. Like at the end of the day, a huge part of your success is going to be determined by your ability to raise capital. Yeah. And investors themselves, like they're not all experts in your field or experts on, I don't know, entrepreneurship, but they generally have a good gut on whether ideas will succeed or not. And if they don't, then they usually don't make it as an investor. So it's good, like, I don't know, like dumbing down, but like if you can't ultimately get to the point where you can say, like, this is my product, I sell X to Y for Z, you're going to be in trouble.
Exactly. And I think it's about how you tell the story and craft the narrative to make it really clear, concise, and compelling. And it doesn't have to dumb it down. I mean, I'm glad you corrected me on that because I always try to be like, what's the basic, simplest way to explain it? Because I think once you get past that, then the details flow. Like, okay, now we're going to understand what this whole federated data thing is. But if you can't get past that first step, which a lot of entrepreneurs don't actually, because they complicate things too much, you're just going to, like you said, like you need investors. They have money. You need money. Therefore, you need to convince them to give you the money. And
there are people who see what other companies do and have tracked up companies and, give you it's just a different angle. People sometimes, it doesn't work well if we have like an operator who doesn't listen to the financier, or we have a financier who's trying to be an operator. That doesn't work. But often kind of like if each party brings their own skills to the table, it's required that you can't do without it.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time. I mean, this has just been such a great conversation. I just learned so much, and good luck to you at Rhino Health. I'll be calling for you. I really think what you're going to do is transform the world. I mean, seriously. Thanks again. Good luck, and keep in touch.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Entrepreneur Ethos podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it. My hope is that you learned something that can make you a little bit better. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do share it with friends and review it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also join my email list by visiting theentrepreneurethos.com to get my thoughts on what I'm doing to get better, as well as what I'm working on. You can also pick up my book, The Entrepreneur Ethos, if you want to learn the traits, values, and beliefs that I think we need to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient entrepreneur and, frankly, world community. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at TheDailyMBA and let me know if you have any questions or recommendations for a guest you'd like me to talk to. Also, drop me a note if you try anything we talked about on this or any other episode. I'd love to hear what's working for you. Until next time, keep getting better.